I want the
I pushed the
confidentiality
glass
clause
door
removed,
and the
Damien.
apology sat
Right
on the
here.
mahogany
We have the data,
desk like
Mr. Ryan.
evidence.
You can't be
Betrayal
serious,
tightened my
Ava.
throat
This isn't
before I could
negotiable.
breathe.
I
Damien
understand
stood
the
behind the
terms.
desk,
I
one
understand
hand
the terms,
flat
Damien,
on the
but the
wood,
valuation
and the
is
other near a
non-negotiable.
sealed promotion letter.
Ava, this offer is
His
more
face
than
held the
generous.
controlled reserve I had
Here are
learned
the
to read as
amended
distance.
terms.
Ava,
Thank you. I'll
he
review
said,
them now.
and the name landed like a careful measurement. I folded my fingers under my thumb without thinking, the gesture I use when I steady myself. The conflict was immediate. The envelope bore my name in a slow, official typeface and, on top of it, a single page with a typed apology that did not apologize for what had been done, only for the pain of the outcome. I moved closer to the desk because movement felt safer than stillness. Why now? I said, why this wording? My voice stayed level. My jaw tightened. Damien's steel, grey eyes did not flinch. Damien tapped the letter once. We reviewed your files, Ava. There are things to correct. He slid the promotion sheet forward the way one slides a ledger across a table. This is an offer. There is also a condition. The word condition landed between us like a deliberate pause. Anger rose, then doubt, then an odd, cold calculation. Emotion shifts I could feel in my palms. He read the condition aloud. Accept responsibility for the department's failure 3 years ago and sign a non-disclosure, or decline and remain in your current role with no acknowledgement. The offer was a trade advancement for silence. Damien, I said, you re-asking me to lie about what happened. He did not say yes. I'm asking you to consider the company. Maya's name came to mind immediately, how she had warned me about precedent months ago. I kept my voice even, consider the company by erasing my record. Damien folded his hands, consider the company's stability, Ava. You know how that failure looked externally. This is a repair. The word repair felt like erasure. I found my throat thick. You mean let someone else take blame and we move on? He looked at me as if measuring whether that sentence carried weight. Ava, this is not a personal punishment. It's a structural choice. My first emotion, betrayal, shifted into disbelief. I thought of the late nights at my desk, the annotated slides, the code I had rechecked at 3 in the morning. I thought of the meeting where my suggestions were filed under operational variance, and the boardroom laughter that cut across my sentences. I remembered the minor seam on the project dossier where an internal memo had been quietly rewritten. Those memories were concrete. The fluorescent lamp humming, the stack of printouts I kept, the tiny coffee stain on page 20, one where I had marked a risk. I left the office with the envelope clenched at my side because staying would have been a different kind of surrender. In the hall corridor, Maya waited with her tablet and a neutral face. She saw the paper pressed against my palm and did not need to ask. Show me, she said. I showed her. Her jaw set. Ava, they're reoffering a buy-off. Maya. Her fingers tapped the tablet's case. This is corporate containment. If you sign, precedent will make it easier next time. Her tone was practical, the voice I trusted. We sat in a small interview room and the light from the corridor cut a line across the table. Maya leaned forward. You want the promotion, I know that. But you also want your work acknowledged, not buried. Which matters more to you now? The question pushed me into an immediate calculation. Accept the promotion and secure financial and managerial power, or refuse and risk isolation. I answered with a single concrete plan. I will check the archives. There has to be a record. My voice held a thin steadiness. Maya's eyes narrowed. Check quietly. If there is an uncatalogued incident report, it could be leverage or it could be redaction. Either way, keep me in the loop. Don't go alone into technical storage. I'll open channels if you need it. She pushed the tablet toward me and wrote a short note. Secure access codes, archival terminal, after hours. Her act was a small alliance, a public person in her quietly poised against the company's formal face. At my desk, the evening light was gone. My monitor threw a cool rectangle across the keyboard. The archive terminal required 2 levels of authentication, a manager's token and a secondary clearance. I used my own credentials and the one edge I had learned from scraping internal tickets, a legacy backup attachment that the system had not purged. The terminal's interface was blunt and bureaucratic, each log read like a footnote in someone's attempt to tidy trouble away. The file I found was redacted but contained a chain of emails. One message stood out, a line from an operations head instructing a reassignment of blame to a smaller team to preserve investor confidence. The email thread carried time stamps, 3 years earlier, late night, 6 people in copy. My pulse sped. Betrayal slid into anger as I scrolled and read names that placed responsibility not on me but on the choices made above my level. I printed a copy and placed it in my crossbody bag, the thin gold bracelet at my wrist brushing the paper. I left the office past midnight because the building emptied and bodies of light receded. The security desk barely looked up as I passed. I walked to the elevator and rehearsed my approach. Call Damien, confront, demand acknowledgement, or return the next day with counsel. I decided to return immediately. I pressed the elevator button with measured fingers and felt resolve harden. At Damien's doorway I stopped and readied the printed pages. He was not in the office. His light was off, but the desk lamp glowed. I knocked and entered. He rose from the corner chair and did not put on the overcoat draped there. "You shouldn't be here at this hour," he said. I set the papers on the threshold between us. "Read them," I said. "They show the instruction to shift blame. They show the reassignment memo." My hands were steady. My breathing measured. Damien's eyes changed first, an almost imperceptible falter in the steel. "Ava," he said, and his voice carried the smallest fracture. "Where did you get these?" I named the archive. I described the redactions, the timestamps, the operations head's phrase. He closed his hands slowly. We argued with short, precise lines the way people do in boardrooms when stakes are numerical but consequences are human. "Damien, you told me to take the fall in the debrief. You mean to sign a note taking responsibility. I asked you to own the client-facing narrative. That is not the same as blame." "Damien, that's semantics. Maya knows this." "Maya, tell him." Maya appeared at the office door then, not a shadow but a person with her notepad and a clear look. "Damien, you made a call to preserve investor confidence. You didn't tell staff the reasoning." Her voice was even. "This is about accountability." The conversation shifted. Emotion moved from anger to focused strategy. I watched Damien fold his hands and pause. If this is made public, the board will react. If it is public, the company's valuation may suffer. This is not an idle threat, Ava." His hands were steady, but a tremor ran through the sentence. "Then we make them react," I said. "We show the records. We let the board decide what's worth more. Reputation managed by concealment, or a company that stands by its people." Maya placed her tablet between us and tapped a folder. "We can file a formal complaint. I can open the whistleblower channel." Her decision was a small escalation. Damien stepped back and his posture tightened. He used the same boardroom cadence, pieces of phrasing I had heard him use in presentations. "You will force the board's hand, Ava. You understand the consequences. There are numbers attached to every disclosure." I moved closer. "You offered me a promotion in exchange for silence. That was your choice. You can still own it. Tell the board you authorize the reassignment and accept responsibility." The tension wound into a near climax in the doorway. Damien's voice lowered. "Make no mistake. I'm offering 2 paths. Accept the promotion and the non-disclosure, and you will have authority and resources to do the work you say you want. Refuse and you will be isolated while this company protects itself." He listed the consequences with a measured precision. The conversation turned into negotiation. 3 to 6 quick exchanges where names and terms repeated. "Damien, listen to me." "Ava, hear me out." "Maya, this is untenable." "Ava, think about your team." "Damien, you think this is only about numbers." "No, Ava, it's about survival." The back and forth was rapid and exact. Emotion shifted again. Doubt flickered in me. Was I prepared for a fight that could cost me my career? And then clarity settled as a pragmatic choice. I had a printed chain of emails, a witness in Maya, and the secure whistleblower channel Maya could open. I put the papers on the desk and looked Damien in the face. "I will not sign your non-disclosure. I will not take blame for something that was orchestrated to protect numbers." My voice was flat, my jaw unclenched. Damien's face tightened. He reached for something, an attempt at patience, but the fracture in his control was visible in how his hands hovered before falling to his sides. "If you proceed, Ava, you will lose the promotion and possibly more. This isn't punishment, it's consequence." Maya answered for me. "We will open the whistleblower portal, Damien. We will provide the documentation. I will advise on procedure to reduce legal exposure." She named contingency steps with precise wording. "Secure evidence, timestamp submissions, prepare her witnesses." Her choices changed the direction of the conflict. Outside the conference room, the heartbeat of the building had slowed. We moved activities into a small, empty interview space to avoid surveillance. Maya's fingers flew through the tablet. She prepared a formal complaint that cited the archived emails, the reassignment memo, and the instruction to shift blame. I dictated lines, spoke names, and told the story in direct, short sentences, who had said what, when, and to whom. Each articulated detail pressed the situation into a concrete form. We found an unexpected twist. A previously overlooked footnote in the archived backup indicated an operations director's private note that linked the reassignment decision to a vendor's delayed component. The vendor invoice attached to the backup had a timestamp I had not expected. The discovery changed the narrative because it introduced a party outside the company whose billing delays had triggered managerial choices. I felt adrenaline. This new fact meant the board could not claim internal error alone. External supply issues were visible. Maya's eyes flashed. This changes legal exposure. We'll need to include vendor communications. She typed instructions and called the legal liaison she trusted. I watched her move and felt grateful for the steadiness of her method. She had been my confidant and protector in other small fights. Now she had become a linchpin in a larger push for accountability. We prepared the files. Maya ensured timestamps matched the printed copies. I copied the evidence onto the secure whistleblower portal and attached a cover note that stated plainly, "This is a formal complaint requesting investigation into deliberate reassignment of blame." I did not inflate motive or moralize. I documented facts, times, names, and attachments. Each line was a tool. At dawn I walked to the building exit with a physical calm that was not the same as assurance. My fingers brushed the thin gold bracelet at my wrist, and I told myself that action would replace rumor. Maya placed her hand briefly on my shoulder and said, "You did the right thing, Ava." I answered, "Thank you, Maya." Her presence had shifted the fight from private to procedural. I turned my badge in the reader and watched the green light flash. A security guard nodded as the revolving doors pulled open. The morning city light hit the lobby glass and cast a clean brightness across the polished floor. I exhaled once and stepped out. My phone vibrated. An unread message from an unknown board associate asking to meet. I kept walking and opened my email to confirm the whistleblower submission had processed. The portal confirmed receipt. I slid the printed packet back into my bag. The chapter closes on a concrete movement. I uploaded the files to the secure portal, slid my badge out of the reader, and walked through the revolving doors while the city morning light hit the lobby glass. The choice had been made. Consequences would follow, but the immediate fight, the offer dangled on a mahogany desk, the conditional apology, the redacted memo, had been answered with documentation, names, and a formal channel. The building receded behind me as a set of decisions I had turned into action. Emotion, betrayal, emotion shifts. Betrayal, anger, doubt, focused clarity. Betrayal drove me to search archives and pushed me to refuse the silence offered by power. The receptionist slid a stamped memo across the desk and said, "Maya needs you in her now." I took the paper with one hand and felt my knuckles tighten. Betrayal rose in my chest before I could shape a question. The word pushed my jaw shut and set my index finger under my thumb the way I do when I steady myself. "What is it?" I asked. The woman pointed toward the elevators and the plaque that read Human Resources. That single gesture made the conflict immediate. They had deferred the promotion I had expected, and someone wanted to hide it behind process instead of answering for the promise Damien had sent me months ago. I moved through the lobby with the memo folded in my palm. I kept the signature visible, Maya Chen, Hadra Director. The elevator smelled of coffee and polishing spray. The betrayal I felt did not sit as an abstract pain. It pressed against my throat and made my hands fidget with the thin gold bracelet at my wrist. I could still see the apology on Damien's desk from 2 days ago, the sealed paper sitting on mahogany like evidence. That apology had been a private thing between his corner office and me. Now a public procedure threatened to erase its force. Maya closed the hard door behind me and put the memo on the table. She did not look surprised when I folded my arms. "Ava," she said. "They changed the announcement." Her voice was level. She pushed a redacted complaint across the desk and an official board memo beside it. "They deferred promotions pending review. Your name isn't on the released document." I read the memo fast, eyes scanning dates and coded language. The words were precise and bureaucratic. My body moved before my thoughts. I stood and walked to the window, palms flat on the sill, and watched the traffic move without slowing. I could feel doubt shift into anger. I tasted it as metal at the back of my mouth. "You mean Damien apologized," I said. "He put the offer on the table." I named him because saying his name kept the moment real. Maya met my eyes. "I know he apologized in private. We have an email thread where he promised you the role months ago." She tapped the tablet with a thumb, but the board flagged an internal complaint. "They're recalling for investigation before they release any official promotions." She folded her hands and waited. That pause pushed me to act. "Who filed the complaint?" I asked. My voice stayed controlled because I had learned how to keep it even. Maya looked down at the page. "It's redacted. We only have the summary. Confidentiality." Her lips tightened in a line that meant she hated that clause as much as I did. The document changed the scene. The apology on Damien's desk was no longer only a personal thing. It had become evidence in a corporate process that could override his words. I left her with the tablet tucked under my arm and the memory of Damien's hand resting on the mahogany desk. My steps were measured in the glass corridor. A junior analyst passed me with a stack of binders and nodded. I stopped him and asked, "Have you seen the leadership release?" He shook his head and kept walking. That small exchange moved me closer to a confrontation because silence would destroy the only proof I had. I caught Damien midway through the corridor between conference rooms. He was walking fast, camel overcoat flung over his arm, eyes forward. I moved into his path and said, "Damien." He stopped. He kept his hands folded in front of him as he always did when listening. "Why is my promotion deferred?" I asked. I did not whisper. The corridor glass carried our voices to the framed certificates on the opposite wall. He looked at me for the first time in the morning without smoothing his face. "Ava," he said, "there's an internal complaint we have to investigate." He spoke with the controlled rhythm he reserves for the board. "We can't announce anything until that's resolved." I could see the faint vertical line between his brows. The guilt I had seen in his office 2 days earlier was there, compacted behind that line. "You promised me the role," I said. "You put it on your desk." My voice caught on the last word. "That apology, what does it mean if the board can override it?" I asked. Damien's jaw tightened. "The board's process is independent," he said. "I didn't expect them to intervene this way." His hand hovered near his coat pocket. "I apologized because I believed it was right. But the company has rules." His answer sounded like a defense and a distancing all at once. I felt anger move into clarity. A shift from wounded confusion to a plan for accountability. I wanted something concrete, not words that could be retracted. He lifted his chin slightly. "Ava, come to the meeting this afternoon. Speak up if you have concerns. I will not prevent you from expressing them." The phrase was careful. It did not contain the commitment I needed. "Damien," I said, and I kept the name like a lever. "I want the position I was promised." Not a vague invitation to object in public. My hands were steady. I had practiced this sentence in the mirror. He did not respond immediately. He only folded his hands and watched me with his steel, gray eyes. The boardroom meeting began with Damien standing at the head of the table. He for support for a reshuffle and named another candidate as the interim lead. The senior leadership sat with tablets open and faces arranged into neutral masks. I slid into my chair and felt every eye register my arrival. The memo on my lap felt like a hot coal. Maya sat 2 seats down, hands folded on her tablet. Her presence anchored me. She had the practical gaze of someone who reads policy for marks of protection. Damien spoke in the same measured baritone he always used, effective immediately. "We will reassign responsibilities for the product unit while we complete the review." He did not say my name. He named the alternate candidate. "I expect your cooperation," he said. Silence fell like an instruction. I heard one of the senior VPs clear his throat. "Damien, are you saying this is temporary?" he asked. Damien's answer was precise. "Yes. Temporary pending review." I felt the room shrink because the decision had been made in public without me. The reshuffle was a spectacle of authority. I looked at Maya. She stood and handed me a paper she had printed. It was an excerpt from an email thread with Damien's header and the exact line where he promised the role. He did put it in writing. "Maya, me and her 2 months ago he intended this path." Her voice was low but firm. That detail shifted the argument from procedure back to personal responsibility. After the meeting, I returned to Maya's office, with the email printed between my fingers. We sat across from each other and read the thread aloud. Damien, I support Ava for the lead. Please proceed when ready. Those were his words, clear on the page. Maya's face did not change when she read them, but I saw her mind working, counting what the department could do to protect me. We moved into negotiation mode without theatrics. He promised you the role. Maya, we can use this thread as evidence to demand a written agreement with oversight. She flipped to a blank template and began typing. I watched her fingers, my anger tempered into tactical calm. The second emotion shift settled in. From accusation to strategy, Maya, I said, I won't sign away public recognition for a private favor. She nodded and kept typing. Then we'll make it public. We'll draft terms that include reporting lines and a review period. Her tone made the path forward concrete. There was a knock on the hair door. Damien's assistant stood in the doorway and said, Damien can see Ava in his office. My chest tightened. The invitation had a cadence like an offer. I stood up and smoothed my blouse. I'll go now, I said. Maya folded the printed thread and handed it to me. Take a copy. She said, don't go alone. I folded the paper into my palm and walked down the corridor that led to his corner office. The glass walls reflected my image, and I checked the small crescent scar above my left eyebrow in one of them without thinking. The corner office smelled of leather and coffee and the faint tobacco, amber note I knew from Damien's coat. He sat behind the mahogany desk with one hand flat on the wood, and a sealed promotion letter beside it. The apology from 2 days earlier still seemed to hang in the air because the envelope was on the same desk. He did not stand. Ava, he said. Sit. I pulled the chair out and sat facing him. The room had the hush of a place made to weigh decisions. He folded his hands and looked at me in a way that asked me to accept his terms. I am sorry, he said. He did not reach for the word as if it were a shield. His apology now carried the weight of someone aware of consequence. I promised you the role. I failed to secure it publicly. I am accountable for that. I let his admission land and watched how his fingers moved when he spoke. He tapped the promotion letter as if to direct my attention. I want to offer you the promotion, he said, publicly. With conditions, his voice tightened on the last word. My heart skidded between hope and suspicion. I reached for the printed email in my bag as proof and set it beside the sealed letter. What conditions? I asked. My voice was steady. He slid a slim document toward me. It read, the promotion would proceed, but Ava would accept a public statement of cooperation, a 6-month oversight review, and a private agreement to defer an internal grievance while the public process continued. Maya had warned me about privately framed concessions. The clause about deferring grievance felt like a muzzle. You want me to sign away my right to contest the board's handling if I accept this? I asked. My hands were flat on the table. Damien did not look surprised. I want the company to move forward without procedural distractions, he said. That requires a measure of discretion from everyone involved. His tone was even. The wording pushed me into a moral crossroad. I felt shame flare, not as a vague mood, but as a physical heat at the base of my skull. Shame shifted into resolve. I would not let a private demand mask a public failing. I spoke quickly because decisions like this demand clarity, no private concessions. I said, I will accept the promotion with public recognition and documented oversight. Anything else must be in writing and visible. Damien's face tightened. He leaned forward in the chair, which was something he only did when the subject mattered. Ava, the board will resist a public reversal without some assurance of stability. His baritone carried corporate logic. We can draft terms that include oversight and public announcement. I can make that commitment now. Maya's earlier plan was taking shape in my mind. We negotiated in short beats. I asked for a clear reporting line and a committee that included Maya. He named a review period and offered to place the promotion letter into the public release if I agreed to a 3-month probation. I pushed for 6 months and a clause for public recognition in the company announcement. He paused, then nodded. We exchanged 3 fast lines. 6 months with oversight, I said. Public announcement on Monday, he replied. And the grievance stays active if needed, I said. Damien looked at me, then at the sealed letter, then back. Agreed. He said, I'll arrange the release. I'll sign it now if you want. He reached for his pen. The motion felt like a hinge closing. Before I could take the pen, the assistant opened the door and announced, "There is a call from legal. They need clarification on the complaint." Damien's hand stilled. An external event pushed between us. The interruption was procedural, but it mattered. It could change the terms he was about to sign. I felt the chapter tighten. I left the office with a tentative agreement in place and a new set of demands formalized in my head. Maya met me in the corridor with a legal pad and new templates. We did not say much. Our mouths were busy with the task. We drafted the public language, outlined oversight, and logged the email thread as evidence. Each action made the bargain less private and more enforceable. The second mini cliffhanger came when Maya, "We should get a signed copy ready tonight." I looked at the clock and realized the hour. The deal would be written while the company slept. That night, I read the draft in the small strip of light that leaked through the hard door. The clauses were precise. Reporting lines, milestones, a public announcement, and a signed statement from Damien acknowledging his prior commitment. I signed where Maya indicated and left the room with a copy for my records. The act of signing changed the power balance. I had converted a private apology into public terms. The next morning, I walked into her and placed the signed copy on the desk. Sunlight slanted through the blinds and marked the paper with a bright band. Maya opened the folder and slid the original email thread beside my signed agreement. "This creates a paper trail," she said. "This protects you." Her calm had the weight of practice. I felt the final shift of emotion, from wary negotiation to cautious agency. I had not won everything. I had gained a structure that made the company's promises harder to erase. As I left her, I paused in the glass corridor and looked back toward Damien's office. The sealed promotion letter still sat on his desk, I imagined, but now there was also the signed agreement in hurt. The physicality of the paper mattered. It was a concrete line I could point to if the board tried to erase me. I stepped forward toward the elevator and then heard a soft knock at the corridor door behind me. I turned. The knock was deliberate. Maya stood in the doorway with a small, closed envelope in her hand. She did not smile. "He sent this with his assistant," she said. I took the envelope and felt the weight of his signature on the flap. Inside was a brief note. "For transparency, I will follow through. D.L." The handwriting was compact and final. I folded the note and set it in my bag. The chapter closed not with sweeping vindication, but with a concrete exchange of signed documents and a knock that promised accountability yet to come. The last sound I heard as I walked away was the elevator doors closing and the envelope resting against the inside of my palm. Emotion route, betrayal, emotion shifts. Betrayal, anger, clarity. Anger, strategy, cautious agency. The envelope was heavy when I picked it up from the podium. Betrayal pulled my fingers tighter around the paper before I could read the first line. I slit the flap with a thumb and found a promotion letter folded around a separate sheet. A draft settlement with a confidentiality clause tucked beneath it. Someone had placed this evidence where the auditorium would make it public, where anyone leaving the late town hall could find it. My throat closed. I shoved the papers into my bag and ran toward her. I had not expected to be carrying a promotion like contraband. The auditorium smelled of lacquer from the stage and the faint citrus cleanser from the chairs. I moved through the empty rows with the letter creased against my ribs. Betrayal was the lens I couldn't dislodge. Every step was measured by the knowledge that an apology had already been given and set on Damien's mahogany desk as if it were a final, tidy thing. I could still see that corner office, his hand flat on the wood, the sealed promotion beside it, when the receptionist called, "Ava, Maya needs you in her now." I did not stop. Maya's office light was on. She stood behind her desk, phone in hand, when I pushed the door open. The room smelled like coffee and paper. The thin scarf at her collar lay neat. I did not know how much I sounded like the papers in her palm when I handed them over. "Maya," I said, "there is a clause." Why would a promotion need a silence agreement? Maya set the legal memo on the desk and folded her hands. Her jaw tightened. She had the attentive tilt she used in meetings when someone tried to negotiate policy around a boundary. "Ava, sit. Tell me exactly what you found." I sat. The chair resisted for a fraction of a second before taking my weight. I put the envelope on the desk between us and smoothed the promotion letter like a map that might reveal its path. It was on the podium. Someone left it there. The letter is real, and the settlement wants confidentiality attached to the promotion. My voice was small but steady. Is that something the company does? Maya's eyes flicked to the sealed envelope, then back to me, not as a rule, not without legal counsel signing off. But this document has counsel language. I can pull the header. She tapped a tablet and swiped. Esther Park's team drafted this, she said. They called it damage control after the board meeting. They wrote the clause as a standard protective measure. My hands tightened into fists beneath the desk. Betrayal shifted into suspicion. If the apology had been genuine, why would legal turn its correction into a condition? If Damien had meant to repair what he had broken, he had either not told legal, or he had told them and allowed them to calcify the apology into silence. I could feel suspicion like a stone lodged at the base of my throat. Maya, I said, did Damien sign this? Did he know the clause would attach? Maya rubbed the bridge of her nose. He authorized the promotion language, yes. He left legal to finalize. I don't know whether he saw the final draft before it went to you. Her voice held care and an edge. Ava, the company is trying to avoid public escalation. That's the angle Esther's memo used. An argument rose inside me, anger, a demand for why my work had been weighed with hush. The first emotion shift happened when anger slid into a cold calculation. I stopped moving in circles in my head and focused on the decision in front of me. If I accepted a promotion that asked me to sign silence, I gained title and salary and lost the right to name what had happened. If I refused, I risked being tagged ungrateful, difficult. Real choices, not rhetoric. I pressed my thumb along the envelope where the paper had warped from fingerprints. Maya stood and pushed a drawer open. She took a binder out and set it between us. We can bring this to Damien, she said, or we can talk to legal. But if you want the promotion without the clause, we have to push for transparent terms now. I can draft a request for amendment, but it's going to need him to authorize it. Then we go to him, I said. My voice had found a sharper edge. Now she nodded. I'll call Esther. I'll copy you. But Damien to see you. He requested you after the memo came in. Her eyes met mine, and I saw pressure there, her own boundary between protecting employees and protecting the company. Maya was the second-named secondary character who had to choose in this room, and the way she chose would matter. She picked up the tablet and typed while I folded the promotion back along its creases. We walked to his office. The corridor lights were low. The carpet swallowed the sound of our shoes. The apology sat on the edge of his mahogany desk, as if it were evidence waiting to be acknowledged all over again. Damien stood behind his chair, hands folded. He looked at the papers as we entered, and the controlled distance that usually lived on his face tightened. His voice when he spoke was low, measured. Ava, Damien, I said, there is a clause attached to this promotion. He inhaled, then set his palms on the desk. I asked for the apology to be offered honestly. I did not intend for it to be a bargaining chip. His words came slowly, the rhythm he used when weighing risk. Maya tells me legal framed a confidentiality clause as standard containment. I will hear you. Sit. I sat across from him with the promotion between us. The room smelled faintly of leather and tobacco, amber, his scent always there like an outline. For a moment the air was full of the small sounds of the office at night, the hum of the Havak, the distant city. The apology letter lay unopened on the desk like a dated statement. I felt a third emotion shift then, from suspicion to guarded curiosity. If Damien could be moved, I needed to test how far. Why would legal do that? I asked, why protect the company instead of fixing what you said you wanted to fix? Damien did not answer immediately. He paused, as if arranging the words on a shelf, because legal sees exposure as risk, because the board sees settlement as efficient, because I wanted the company to move forward without spectacle. He stopped and met my eyes. Ava, you deserve recognition for your work. I am sorry I did not make that clear earlier. Sorry doesn't explain why someone put a clause into my promotion. I placed my palm flat on the table and felt the grain of mahogany under my skin. You apologized, Damien. You put the letter on your desk and I walked in and I heard you say my name. But then legal tries to reduce it to a quiet transaction. That feels like a second erasure. He leaned forward. Ava, I will not erase you. Tell me what you want me to do. His direct question produced a cascade in my head. Accept and be silenced, or refuse and be blamed. But this was not a private negotiation. Maya had already shown me a memo that suggested priority had been applied elsewhere. I needed proof. I needed the record to tell the whole story. Strip the clause, I said. Authorize legal to reissue the promotion without confidentiality. Put the acknowledgement in public record. Back the promotion with an internal memo that references the apology and the change in process. There was a pause long enough for the building's nighttime filtration system to sigh. Damien's palms flexed on the mahogany. If I do that, there will be immediate questions from the board. There will be lawyers asking for containment. He sounded like someone listing costs. If I remove legal's clause, I expose the company to a narrative I am responsible for. Ava, that's a risk I have to take deliberately. My jaw tightened. Then take it deliberately. If you meant the apology to matter, act like it matters. That exchange moved the tension higher. I pushed for clarity. He negotiated responsibility out loud. The conversation tightened until Maya slid a personnel file across the desk with a deliberate hand. Ava, look at this, she said. Open the complaint log from 3 years ago. My fingers trembled while I flipped pages. There it was, a dated internal complaint noting concerning behavior that had been flagged and then deprioritized. The notes showed a short meeting recorded, the suggestion that the complainant would reconsider filing formal paperwork, and a final line that read, recommendation, monitor. The documentation was sparse, and an email chain showed that key information had not been added to the official record. Maya watched my face. Someone left a piece out of the file back then, she said. We missed adding subsequent correspondence. It changes how the case reads. A new twist landed like a heavy file in my lap. The moral burden shifted from an abstract apology to a concrete omission. If the complaint had been handled poorly, the apology on Damien's desk no longer read as tidy restitution. It read as a correction for an administrative failure. Power, which had felt centered in Damien's posture a moment before, moved across the table into our hands because paper now documented neglect, who left the notes incomplete. I asked. Maya's mouth thinned. It was routed through mid-level her at the time. Names here initially handled by a coordinator who noted follow up but never filed it. Then legal closed with the tag monitoring. She tapped the email thread. Esther's team recently treated it as damage control because the board requested a consolidated summary. That summary omitted these follow-ups. The omission mattered. I felt the room tighten around the new information. This was the mid-chapter mini cliffhanger. Documentation that reframed a prior moment and implied someone had allowed it to stay incomplete. My thoughts raced. Who decided to deprioritize the complaint? Whose interest gained from a closed file? The shift overturned the simpler binary of apology versus hush. Now it was about accountability for what had been left out. Damien put a hand over the file. Ava, I did not see the incomplete notes. If someone in our legal failed to file, that is on me to correct now. I will ask Esther to reissue a full report with the missing documents included. I will instruct legal to remove the confidentiality clause. I will authorize a public memo acknowledging the correction. Is that acceptable? I measured my reply by the sound of my own breath. Yes. But I want the amended agreement in writing tonight. I want to sign terms that protect my dignity. I want the promotion to be clear without conditions on my voice. Damien nodded. You will have it. He was deliberate. Every syllable counted. Maya, instruct legal. Esther, create the amendment and circulate it. Ava, be present when we finalize. Maya reached for her tablet and called Esther. The council agreed to draft the amendment. The legal language arrived within the hour, and Maya printed a new document that removed the confidentiality clause and added a line acknowledging the oversight in record keeping. I read the new terms with a cautious hope. The document protected my right to speak about my experience and formalized the promotion with clear compensation title and an internal announcement plan. It felt like regained territory. Before I signed, I looked at Damien. Will you back it publicly? I asked. Will you make that internal memo reference your apology and the changes in procedure so the record is complete? He lifted his eyes and held them. For the first time since I had watched him stand behind that mahogany, his voice lost some of its distance. Ava, I will authorize the memo. I will stand behind the change. I cannot reverse the past, but I will authorize how we move forward. I accept responsibility for the gaps that were left. Those words were not theatrical. He did not reach for a flourish. He looked at the file, then at me, then at Maya. Esther will circulate the amended agreement and the internal memo at dawn. I will sign and put my name on the announcement. If you are willing, I will read the memo aloud at the next town hall. I felt a slow clarity arrive. The emotion shift from suspicion to wary acceptance had moved through negotiation into a practical settlement. Documentation, public acknowledgement, a changed process. This was not a storybook apology. This was paperwork and commitments. I signed the amended agreement at dawn in her with Maya at my side. The pen left a dark line that felt like a hinge closing, but the chapter did not end when ink dried. The morning light in her conference room spilled through blinds. The coffee cup steamed. The amended agreement sat folded on the table. Maya watched me sign with a steadiness I had come to trust. "You did the right thing, Ava," she said. "You forced the company to meet accountability with transparency." Her words were factual, not celebratory. I walked across the city with the signed agreement in my bag. Dawn softened the skyline to a washed gold. The pavement still carried last night's rain. I held the document as if it were heavy and fragile at once. On the rooftop outside my office building, I stopped and looked at the city, and at a message that lit my phone. The message was from Damien. 2 short lines. Ava, agreement received. I authorized the memo. We'll read it together at the town hall. Meet me at 9. The text ended with no flourish. There was a small complication in it. His practice of measured brevity now translated into an unresolved personal note. It me he intended to follow through, but left open what that follow through would mean for us beyond the professional boundary we had re-established. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked down the stairs. The concrete felt solid beneath my soles. The signed agreement in my bag was proof that the choice I had forced in the quiet hour had produced a concrete change. No clause, an explicit acknowledgement, and an internal record that included the previously omitted documents. The legal contours of dignity were now in ink. Maya met me in the lobby with her scarf tied the same way it had been the night before. "I'll be at the town hall," she said. "I'll stand with the documentation and answer procedural questions." She handed me a printed copy of the memo Esther had prepared. Clear, direct language that referenced the oversight and the corrective measures. At 9, the announcement went out. Damien read the memo aloud in the town hall. He named the error in record, keeping acknowledged the company's responsibility, and authorized the promotion without confidentiality. He used my name when he spoke. I felt the audience's gaze as a practical pressure, not as judgment. Maya sat in the front row with her tablet open, eyes calm. The board asked questions. Legal answered. The public record closed one loop. After the town hall, people came up to me, some with awkward apologies, some with quiet thanks. The promotion letter sat in my inbox as a formal file. I had a copy stamped and archived. The gap in the record had been filled. The moral burden had shifted away from being an unexplained apology into being a documented correction. My choices had forced that movement. When the day wound down, Damien found me in the corridor. He stopped a foot away and exhaled, "Ava, thank you for pressing this." I meant what I said. His voice was low and lacked the theatrical register of someone performing remorse. It sounded genuine in an ordinary way. "Thank you for listening," I said. The exchange was practical, a recognition, not an emotional resolution. "Will the company change procedures so this can't happen again?" Yes, he met my eyes. I've instructed her and legal to update the complaint handling protocol and the audit trail. Maya will oversee the implementation. Maya's presence then felt less like a bystander and more like a fulcrum. She had chosen to act both as protector and administrator, and her choices had altered the course of the company that night. She appeared behind Damien and nodded once. "We start with a clear audit and mandatory documentation steps," she said. "No more monitor without files. No more closed loops." Ava breathed in that small institutional victory and let the tension in her shoulders ease by a fraction. The signed agreement in my bag was not a cure for what had happened in the past, but it was a structural change that reduced the chance of the same omission occurring again. It felt like an enactment of respect executed through paper and policy. I walked back to my desk with the knowledge that the promotion would arrive clean and public. and that my name would be attached not to a condition but to a decision. The city's late light made the office windows glow. I opened my inbox and found a short calendar invite from Damien titled "Follow-up meeting." He had left the time blank with a one-line note. "We will discuss implementation and next steps." There was no personal text. There was accountability. There was, quietly, the possibility that the personal complications between us would surface in future conversations, but that was beyond the document on my desk. I set the signed agreement on my shelf. The last paragraph of the amendment read, "This promotion is issued without confidentiality requirements and accompanied by an internal corrective memo acknowledging prior record, keeping omissions and the steps taken to correct them." I fingered the printed words and felt a concrete closure, a paper that tied the apology to action. Maya sent me a message that evening. Agreement signed. Implementation starts Monday. "Good work, Ava," I replied with a single line. "Thank you, Maya." It was brief and true. Then my phone buzzed once more. Damien's message read, "Ava, I'll honor this. We'll speak tomorrow morning about the implementation and oversight." Damien, it was careful, and it left the personal conversation open but deferred. I stood at the window with the city spread beneath me, like a ledger of choices made and to be made. The morning had given me a signed document. The night had given me a message that promised accountability. The company's record now showed the correction. The file that once read "Monitor" now had the missing emails included. The apology no longer sat alone on Damien's mahogany. It had been translated into an action that changed policy. I slid the amended agreement into my bag and locked my office door behind me. My step was measured as I walked out of the building into a day rearranged by a choice made in the quiet hour. The phone buzzed again with a calendar notification. Town Hall follow-up 9 a.m. I tapped accept and felt the hard edge of the choice settle into a new routine. The signed agreement was in my bag, and his message waited unread in my pocket. An unresolved note that marked the end of a chapter and the start of a different kind of work.